In this video, we'll be taking a look at Baucis and Philemon, lines 12 to 25. If you want to check out lines 1 to 11, feel free to click on my other video. Now let's get started. The first line is a sentence of its own, with only the tetigere as the tricky part, as it looks like an infinitive, but actually Ovid meant for it to be in the indicative. So you can just translate it as touch or touched. Now, as a whole, this sentence means, therefore, when the heaven dwellers touch the little household gods, little and household gods are in the accusative. Now, this might not make any sense to an English speaker, and that's because the Romans have this custom of paying respect to the household gods when they enter a door. So basically, what Ovid is describing is the heaven dwellers going through the door and entering Baucis and Philemon's house. Now he repeats that idea in the second line, and they enter with lowered heads through the low doorposts. Or you can translate it as they entered the low doorposts with lowered heads. Now, what happens inside the house? The old man, which is our nominative, bade them to relax on the position couch. You sit here means bade instead of order. That's because Ovid is trying to give him a more welcoming tone than an ordering tone. Now, as I mentioned earlier, how the infinitives usually mean the indicative, that is not the case here, as this is an indirect command. So we know use it must have an infinitive to follow it, which is to relax. So the old man bade them to relax on the position couch. Here, posito is a perfect passive participle, just to watch out there. Now the next line, onto which busy Baucis threw a rough cloth. Now there's not much in particular to see here. Busy Baucis is the nominative, and qui is the dative, which is describing the position couch in the previous line. Then she moved the warm ash in the hearth. Now you might be asking, why did I say she moved instead of he moved? Because we cannot tell the subject from demoit. Now that is because in the previous line, Baucis is the one doing the action. So when the subject is not necessarily clear, we should always try to carry the subject onto the next sentence. Now, you have to forgive me here. This is meant to be cinerum, not cinere. I just have to add the M over here. So that tells us warm ash is the accusative, and foco is in the ablative. So we should supply in the hearth. In your real texts, you will always find the ablative to be accompanied by a little accent, so it'll be very easy to spot. Now, the next line, and she roused yesterday's fires. And the subject is ignis here. Just to watch out, it's on the previous line. And suscitat is the subject. And hysterno is surprisingly the accusative. And here we have another set of actions from Baucis. And she fed. Notice how the subject is also at the start of the next line. And she fed it with leaves and dry bark. Why did I say it's with leaves and dry bark? Now that's because these are both in the ablative. However, we have to remember that dry doesn't necessarily go with leaves, but only goes with bark. And that's because leaves are in the neuter, but both bark and skio are in the masculine. Just something to watch out there. And then her final set of actions, and she led it to flames with the breath of an old woman. Now, producat may look familiar, and that's because it is composed of two Latin words you may find familiar, pro and ducat. Ducat means led, and pro means to towards. So together, they're combined into a compound verb into led it to. So, she led it to flames, ad flammas, with the breath of an old woman. Just note that these are both ablatives, so they have to have a preposition supplied with it. Now, some more actions from Baucis here. She brought down from the roof. Now, how do I know it's from the roof? Because again, tecto is in the ablative. So I'm going to supply a preposition, and in this case, it's going to be with. So she brought down from the roof torches that are split into many pieces and dry sticks. How do I know torches goes with split into many pieces and sticks goes with dry? Again, it all has to do with their genders. These two are feminine, whilst these two are in the neuter. And then, a nice little easy sentence. She made it small. Well, she made them small, to be precise. The torches and sticks. And she moved them into the small bronze pot. Just take care that the quay needs to be supplied between the minuet and the parwell. And the fact that the parwell goes with I know and not minuet. They might look similar. However, the parwell is actually describing the bronze pot. So what he's saying is she's taking this tiny little sticks and moving them under this very little pot. He's basically placing an emphasis on their poverty and their lack of possessions. And now for this next line, you might be tempted to go for gathered as the main verb. However, that is not correct, as this is a clause on its own. Now, the main verb is actually truncat, and this is still referring to Baucis. This is not the genitive, but this is still the ablative, but still translated as strip a cabbage of its leaves. Which, now this which, because it's an accusative, it has to go with the cabbage. So, which cabbage had been collected by her husband. Now, suis might be masculine, but that doesn't mean his husband, because the suis has to agree with conjugs. So although the suis is talking about Baucis, it's going to be masculine because it is referring to Philemon. The well-watered garden are in the ablative, so we're going to supply a from here. Finally, we have some action from Philemon. You might be wondering, how do we know that it's Philemon? Because again, the lewa is not telling us much. And that's because of the ille. If Ovid is referring to Baucis right now, he would be using illa instead of ille. Since this is masculine, we can deduct that he is talking about Philemon. So he lifted down with a 2-pronged fork. Now these are both in the ablative. So we're going to supply the preposition with here. The sooty back of a pig, genitive. What does sooty mean? It could mean sooty or smoked. Just means it has been cooked. Now this is a present participle. You can tell from the nt stuck neatly in that word. Now, it's hanging from a blackened beam, and you can probably guess these are both in the ablative. So again, what preposition are we going to supply in this instance? It's going to be from. So, what is Philemon doing here? He is taking a 2-pronged fork, which will look something like that, and he's gently lifting down a smoke back of the pig. I should probably use black for this one. Hanging from a blackened beam. The wording might look a bit off to you because I put the 3 above 2 words. And that is because they're a little phrase on their own, preserved for a long time. Now, let's go to the verb. He had cut off, and the he, of course, is referring back to Philemon from the previous sentence. Now, just take this bit as an adjective. And he cut off from. Notice how day is not off here, and that is because day plus the ablative means off. And the ablative we're talking about is the back here. This is the ablative. Now, he took off from the back part a long preserved section. Now he repeats that section with having cut off a very small section, and he made it tender with the boiling waves. Notice how these are both ablatives. So we have to supply a with here. And of course, the eagle eyes of you may notice how the verentibus is actually a present participle. So what is happening here? Basically, Ovid is just describing Philemon cutting off a very, very small section of this pig in order to emphasize Baucis and Philemon's poverty, as they're not even willing to feed their guest a very old and very tough piece of meat. But he tries to counteract that oldness by softening it in the water, probably unsuccessfully. But the thought is still there. And that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to continue learning about Baucis and Philemon, then please go check out my other videos. But for now, walete.